All right, so here I am with Eddy Labus. Eddy and I work together at the Watauga Extension Office, and he is our livestock extension agent. And so I'm really happy to have you here to show us how to process a deer.
Yes, it's always a fun workshop we do. We usually like to have a classroom full of people and do, so we're going to try something different. But I think, you know, this deer especially kind of, and where we're at, because here's where this deer was, and we're right outside the town of Bone Limits. Margie's not a hunter, but this deer came from her place, and it's a great way if you're having issues with deer in your landscape to find a hunter that can come in and maybe give you some of this venison, and that you can work it up yourself. So we're always looking at options, but if you are a hunter, we want to give you some tips today and some pointers on how to process your own game. Generally, to process a deer at some processing facility is $75 to $150.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and so like this deer was probably a 90-pound doe when she was live, and we're probably going to end up harvesting about 25 or 30 pounds of meat from her. So about a third of live weight, but it's a good meat, and it's high quality, low fat.
Yes, very lean.
Very lean meat. So it's one of my favorite steaks, and I can't wait for dinner this evening because I'm going to enjoy some out of it.
But, definitely.
Well, thanks for having me here. And we're going to start. So one thing is, you know, when that deer, when it's killed, whether that's you or somebody else, first thing you want to do is to get that carcass as cool as possible, as quickly as possible. So getting the entrails out. And we're going to show this deer was harvested with an arrow, and we're going to show because one of the arrows pierced some of the intestines. But the hunter does an excellent job of cleaning. I cleaned some more. I'll show you some of the carcass where it damaged the carcass, so we've had to throw some of the meat away. But one of the things, I'm always worried about food safety, and my wife, she's always telling me, boy, you're really worried, but I don't want to get sick from things I eat.
Right, and we learn a lot about that working in extension. So.
Exactly, and you know, meat, I'm a livestock guy, and meat to me gets a bad rap because, you know, a lot of food poisoning is not meat. And
a lot of it's the greens.
Exactly, and so I like to teach everything about food safety with our meat, and so that we do a better job as consumers or, you know, people just eating that. So one thing, most of us don't have a walk-in cooler or a cooler to hang these deer in, even if you quarter it up. So one thing, I cool them in a cooler. And so I want to show a little bit about how we store these in the cooler here. And this deer, I worked part of it up last night, but the ice is on the bottom. Sometimes I like to freeze water in a milk jug and put in here because you don't have water in here. Water is not our friend for a carcass. And so you can see what I've done is I've put some containers there to keep these cuts up off of it. I'll show this a little bit better, but covering these open areas with some saran wrap when you put it in here prevents dehydration of this animal, so we don't have as much waste. So we're going to start here with our front quarter. I'll get it out and show a little bit more about it. So I'll start and show the area of ribs, and you can see here the arrow came into this animal here. You can see some blood clots on the inside. This is the front shoulder. It would be the front left-hand shoulder. But it actually hit the ribs. I think they probably shot it twice. This is the rib cage that I took off. So you can see a lot of this area here is intestinal contents. And so I went ahead and trimmed that. I like to keep my carcass, when you're field dressing or you're ready to put that in the cooler, get rid of this, because this is the area that we could definitely have contamination with bacteria. Like I say, I just had it for show. A lot of times I threw away a lot of this. Last night I processed half of this animal, and I threw away a lot of meat where this is touched, because there again, food safety is important. And harvesting these ribs, that little bit of meat, is probably not worth the risk that we're taking.
So is it right that the muscle is kind of sterile for the animal?
Absolutely.
And, but then the intestinal tract, that's where you want to stay away from anything there.
Right. So, you know, this being just getting on the surface of this meat is not going to harm us, because when we cook the meat, we cook that outside. Even if you're cooking a rare steak, you're still getting that outside above 180 degrees.
Right.
The bacteria cannot enter the meat. It can only penetrate very, very little bit. So when you're grinding meat, that's much more of a concern. And on deer, I always advise any ground meat to be cooked well done, just for a food safety, because this is harvested in the field. You know, there's no way we can keep it clean. It's drugged through, you know, leaf to get to the vehicle. So, you know, think about food safety. So as we're getting started, some of the tools for the trade here that I like, can we get a garbage can?
Sure, I'll take care of that.
No, thank you. Is knives. So this is probably my favorite butchery knife. It's a boning knife. It's fairly stiff to it. It's easy to get against the bone and cut. Just a butcher knife to cut. And I use a very flexible knife, a boning or a fillet knife, to take off the silver skin. And we'll talk more about it as we get in there, but to trim that meat. And then we have a couple of different knives here that we use for slicing cuts after it's harvested. I have a good bone saw. I'm not a big person for ribs, and that's generally what we use it from, or at least from deer. I'll use it on pigs and other, you know, for that. So I do like to put a cut-resistant glove on when I'm working, and I'll also put something on just to protect my other hand. Always, you know, practice cleanliness. I'll wash my hands a lot as I'm going, and keep your area free. Now, the first rule of butchering yourself is if your knife falls, do not try to catch it. Just move your foot back, let it fall where it may. More people's trying to catch knives falling off of counters than they are, I think, cutting something, or at least more serious cuts. So the front shoulder is not attached anywhere by bone, just by ligament and muscle. It's very similar to a rabbit, so you've got this flat scapula here. Cows are the same way. This is the area where you would call your chuck if we're referring to beef. And I'm just going to start by trimming so you can see this blood clotting from where the animal bled out is not into the meat here. It's just on the surface. So we're going to trim. And I did sharpen my knives before I started, because a sharp knife's going to keep you from getting injured as bad. So the nice thing about a lot of people, I think, feel intimidated because they've not seen something done or done it. And I can tell you, with home butchery, learning to do it, there's not really too many mistakes to where you're going to get hurt if you're looking at food safety. Now, I always, you know, on these outer layers, be looking. I don't mind throwing a little bit more away if it looks like the meat has been compromised.
So that part's just like any animal, you're kind of getting the fat off. Is there a little bit of skin there, a little fat under the skin?
We're trimming the fat and the skin, and I'm going to try to leave most of the even the thin layer of muscle here. I'll trim this off. You can just come back in and trim kind of the opposite way. Generally what I like to do is I'll have me 2 or 3 bowls set around, but I'm using a food grade tub, so I'll keep my grind in one end, stew meat in another. We won't cut any steaks until we get the carcass out, and I'll show you cutting the ribeye and the loin and the inner loin out. So most of what you're going to get off of this is going to be stew meat or grind meat or some jerky meat. And everybody has their own preference. If you like tie and roast and you're good at it, well, you can take and debone a lot of venison and tie the roast. It does have a lot of sinew or white skin around each muscle, and I'll kind of show that as we go. I'm just right here where the arrow hit. I'm going to trim any of this blood clot out. A lot of people say, well, it doesn't matter, put it in your grind. To me, it does matter. And there again, I got to clean my glove as I'm going, or I'm just going to spread that.
Yeah, you've got a different kind of glove there, don't you?
Yes, it's a cut resistant. So,
you use some paper towels?
yeah, or a towel, or I should have brought. I've got towels in the car.
Here you are.
Thanks. So this is you can get some of the chain, and I have the chain gloves that I'll use when I'm cutting up pork or beef. But it's you can still get cut. Don't get too complacent with it. I like it because it really helps when things slide, and this meat can be really slick. So you can see I'm just taking that next muscle layer off, and then I'll trim any of this excess membranes off. And most of this is just going into the grind. You can see, I don't know if you can see here or not, but there's long fibers coming this way, and the meat lays this way. And that wraps around the other. So what happens with this, there's lots of different muscles that make these legs be able to take impact of jumping. And so they're wrapped many ways. So it's a little bit harder to cut out some whole muscles to eat here, but you could definitely treat some of this as fajita meat, or even possibly cooking it kind of like a skirt steak. I just grind it. I like a lot of ground meat. Margie does too.
Well, the ground meat, to me, it seems really versatile. I mean, I cook it up for tacos, put it in my spaghetti sauce, kind of just use it any way that you would use regular ground meat. So.
Yeah, it's easy. And for me, that's what I'm going to get off of here. Now, this grinder over here, I'll just talk a little bit while I'm working, but it's a 3/4 horsepower. It's not a commercial grinder, but it is a little bit the grade above what they carry for homeowners. So what that means is when you're buying a grinder, the biggest problem is the motor that's in it. So this motor's it'll take a little bit more work to it. Of course, if you have, some of the mixers they have, they'll have grinders you can get with it, and it's fine. And I'm just cleaning off all of those blood clots here. And then you see this muscle here. I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to go right down that white line. And you get up here to your knuckle. So I make a cut this way, and then turn around and just go right down that line. And you got to cut around this scapula because it has, I'll show you when we get on in here how those bones lay. Turn it over and follow that line right on out. So we're removing a whole muscle group, or a whole muscle, not group. And I'm just going to trim around this knuckle. Because my goal is, what I do is, there's not much meat on here. I don't want to keep a lot of bone or anything. And so I want to get the most yield out of it. And when it's done, you should mainly have bone. Even on a big deer, the yield is not much.
Wonder what the biggest deer, how much do they weigh?
So around here, if you're looking at a mature buck here in the mountains, you know, I would say a live weight of 150 to 180 pounds. A lady killed one in Avery County in bow season right at the end of September. That was 180 pounds, I think, live weight.
I don't think I've seen one like that around here, but
There's not very many. We're not in farm country, and that makes a big difference where we're at. So you can see this meat here, it would be great for stew meat. I could actually take and cut that or leave that as a whole muscle, roll it up, tie it, and make a medallion out of it. I think we're going to grind most of this.
how would you cook that if you made a medallion out of that?
Well, I would want to cook it, start out to sear at high heat, and then cook it in a liquid, probably at low heat covered. You know, some good red wines to me are great to cook with venison because it has that depth of flavor, and the wine really brings it out.
And if it has any wildness to it, the wine might kind of cover that flavor?
Yeah, it would. And so you bring up a good point with the wild gamey flavor. Generally, I think that's going to be more among male animals, just for the sheer the testosterone and some of the other secondary glands that they have.
Those boys.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're having a hunter come on your place to hunt, tell him you want a doe for two reasons. The meat's not as gamey, and removing the females from those herd really reduces the population, and that's what biologists would much rather prefer us doing. And I know here in Boone, go walk the greenway if you don't think we have a deer problem. You'll be surprised.
They're not even scared of you.
Oh no, you know, you go over there for a run and they're just like, they greet you, you know.
What's going on? I was just having a little snack as usual.
So like I say, I'm cutting this to grind. And so the reason is in this grinder is it feeds down this tube. If you have it long, it reaches that auger. If you have short pieces, you're always having to use the plunger to keep that meat going down. Now I'm just going to come back and take this tail off because we don't want to leave very much on the bone. And it may look like there's some muscle there, but there's not much at all. And you can see my knife won't go in. So that's the rise in that scapula there. So we're just going to go down the opposite side. And then peel it back. You'll see a connective tendon in there. And I don't try to get too close at the knuckle right now because I like a sharp knife. And the way you keep a sharp knife is you never let it touch bone. And which I've never found a way to do butchering deer.
I think that'd be kind of hard. So we talked about maybe making some stock out of the deer meat.
Yeah.
I learned that the best stock comes from the knuckles and cartilage.
Mm-hmm. So this leg here would probably make great stock because it does have that knuckle to it. And it has a lot of cartilage. And we can trim it up, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then you do need a bone saw to make it manageable in the kitchen. I guess if you have a huge pot, you know, you could definitely use longer bones. So, you know, things that you can get by without purchasing is like a bone saw. Now here in Watauga County, we do have some butchery equipment that we loan out. And you know, you can contact our office here in Watauga County and we'll hook you up with what we have. Just realize that, you know, some of this stuff gets used a lot, and we're getting ready to get into pork harvest, you know, season, and we'll have people that are, in fact, next Thursday, I'm helping a guy butcher a pig. So, you know, it's getting to that point. But definitely if you have a buddy that you like to hunt with, you know, purchase a few of these things, start. I think the most important thing is a clean work area. I've went to butcheries and we're out in a barn and dirt floor, and I don't know, for me, even though I grew up butchering hogs like that, it just doesn't seem safe. And I would prefer to have, you know, concrete where we can clean and all. So like I say, I'm cutting most of this up to be ground just because that's what we like, or what we're wanting out of this animal. Now you can see I'm going down here on the flat and my knife's just turning and getting right on the flat of that bone.
Seems like a good bit of work, Eddie.
It is.
But you know, it's I guess it's free meat. Other than it's labor. Oh, there it goes.
Yeah, you know, it is free meat, and it's good, healthy protein for us. But it's a lot of work, and once you've done one like this, you start understanding why they charge so much.
Of course, you can cut it the way you want when you have total control over that.
Yeah, so you can take a cut like this muscle, and this would be what you would get as a chuck steak. And so you can turn it, and you can roll this to make a good roast out of it. Take a piece of butcher string or a netting, and all of those you can find online now. Like I say, I just don't try to make everything steak anymore.
Well, I would think you could. The stew meat's really good to use.
It is. You know, the stew meat is so great. Margie's going to show you how to make that, and it preserves without refrigeration. It's the quickest meat when I come home to cook.
Once it's canned?
Once it's canned, you know.
Well, ours is going over here. The pressure is going, and so it's an hour and 15 minutes for the pint. An hour and a half for the quart that it has to stay under pressure.
I can say Margie and I's tried. We've done this workshop several years, and we've tried several different things with it. And canning it just works so well. Last year we had some issues with it sealing. We didn't have a good seal on them, and I'm not sure what that was, but what was it? 2 years ago we tried doing some ground meat. And so when you grind venison, you know, it's very lean meat. So it's not going to stick together. It's not going to make that huge burger that you want per se, unless you add some fat to it. And I was adding beef fat to it. And so we added that fat and we cooked, you know, we canned it. And it boiled the fat out or something, and we had a ton of meat that didn't have liquid on it.
And it didn't, the jar didn't seal, because if you have a lot of fat in it, then it gets it under that seal, and it's yeah, it's not good.
So I know, you know, I grew up canning everything out of the garden, but we didn't can meat. I don't know why. Of course, there wasn't very many deer at that time either. And I know a lot of people butcher hogs and they will can sausage, and I'm still not sure how they do it, because, you know, sausage is getting up there 12-15% fat.
For it to seal, yeah.
So yeah, for it to seal. But I mean, I know lots of people that do and have for years. Now, I'm not saying they do it correctly. They may be doing something they're not supposed to.
That reminds me, it's always important to follow a recipe that's been tested through the USDA. And so you always need to go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation to get a recipe. Or some of the Ball Blue Books are good. But yeah, it's not good to just get that off the internet somewhere.
Or grandma's recipe,
Yeah,
even though
that's
it may be
okay.
great. You know, grandma and them did what they had to do to survive, and it wasn't necessarily food safety all the time that was the top of the list.
I just didn't think about that. I didn't think that way.
Well, that's right.
So most of this then is going to go to grind.
Yes. Now, if I was doing it and I had more time and tomorrow's schedule was free, I would probably cut a lot more stew meat up. My next deer I get, I'll be, putting much more canning it. Now, canning, we had some issues finding some canning lids right now.
Well, it's, I've checked on that, and apparently it's consumer behavior because people have hoarded toilet paper, you remember that, and paper towels, so they've also hoarded canning lids. So hopefully our canning lids will work. You ordered them all online, right?
I ordered these online that we're using, and they're from overseas, and I've never canned with them, so we're going to see how they seal and all. I didn't see anything on the internet I could find about negative reviews with them, but just be thinking about that right now if you're going to can.
It might be hard to get those
It might be
lids.
hard. Jars, I couldn't find any jars.
Well, fortunately, you can reuse the jars and the bands. So it's just the little lids, and they, usually sell those in those little containers. You can get 12 of them. But yeah, you're right. I haven't been seeing them. So
And I think, always be planning ahead. We're not going to vacuum seal today. If you're going to do 2 or 3 deer a year, I recommend vacuum sealing. And the little vacuum sealers at Walmart, and I'm not pushing Walmart, it's just a good place to go that usually has them in stock. So you can see here how this scapula, this flat bone is. And so like I say, if you think of a good chuck roast, when you go to the grocery store, they'll slice it this way. And so you always see this little bone. That's to me the best chuck roast that there is when you find this flat bone here. So, cutting some of this out, and I would have cut more, but it was damaged a lot from, you can see where the arrow come through the bone right here. You just kind of have to, with deer, everything's different because you don't shoot them in the head. So you can damage meat and it changes some things. But very good cut to me. It's probably up there on that third tender muscle group of any animal or of deer and cattle. And for this grinder, I can leave pretty good chunks like that, and it'll pull it right on through. So you can see this is why we call that silver skin. You can see how it shimmers in the light. And that's where I use this very flexible blade. And I'll just kind of go back against it. A lot of times you have to wonder, well, is it worth all the effort on some of these, little cuts? But these little cuts are very good. If I'd be at home right now, I'd have the skillet going and I'd be throwing some of these in there and ready to make me a biscuit to eat.
well, you'll get your jerk, right?
Right.
So this is a good point to see here is that whenever we had to work so hard for our food, nobody overate because they had to spend so much time preparing their food. They didn't have time to overeat.
That's exactly
Just happy
right.
to get.
They were raising it or chasing it.
That's right, raising or chasing. But, a lot of people say, well, where did you learn to cut meat or cut deer? And I come from a very big family, and my oldest brother, he got of course, he was out on his own, and he started deer hunting. There wasn't very many deer where I grew up. And I remember the day well. He got a deer, and he brought it in, and we're taking pictures and hang it up in the garage, and he didn't have really a clue on how to start skinning it. So we went down and we figured it out. And I spent the time cutting that animal up, and that was the start of it. I don't know why I ended up liking it so well.
Now, how old were you when you were doing that?
I was 12.
Oh my goodness.
And
You had your knives at 12.
yeah, I mean, well, I was raised, you know, we did. We raised it or we hunted. And you had to teach yourself how to do it. So now you can see this lower muscle from the shank. What you can do with this, because you can see all of these different muscles and the sinew that's in between each one. This grinder will grind it up. A lot of, like if you have one of the mixer grinders, it'll stop it up. Especially if you start getting your grinder warm or your meat's too warm. It melts some of the fat, and then that kind of mucks everything up on the inside. But you could take and cut this, and this is the knuckle Margie's talking about making some stock from, and we'll take and cut it up here with the saw. So I'll go ahead and trim this other little muscle off. Be careful trimming these bones, because this is where it gets real tricky to cut yourself. You'll stick that point of that knife through and know where your hands or your fingers are. And so what we can do is we'll come in and always on your saw, make sure that your blade, when you put it in, the teeth are facing forward. It actually makes it better. You do get some bone dust with it. It doesn't hurt anything. But you can see this is a marrow bone here. You see inside. So this would be a good one. It has the knuckle on the other end. And then most of the time you could take and tear the scapula off at the upper knee. And that's probably enough right there. You can take and put in the stock pot and make you some good stock, and you'll still have enough meat on that bone instead of trying to trim all these little tendons out that'll go right into, you know, a beef stew.
I'll just put those in the freezer, and then when I have time, I can make some stock.
So if you're hunting more than, you know, you're going to be hunting all season, unless you need that stock, do what Margie's saying, put them bones in there till you get 2 or 3 deer. And it's much easier making stock to make a great big old pot of it. And that way you can take and, how would you can that stock or preserve it, Margie, to keep it long-term use?
Well, you could can it. I would just freeze it, but I know not everybody has a freezer. But I'm not sure. It would have to be pressure canned. I'm not sure the times on that. You have to look that up. But pretty much the method we use to do that.
But I'm sure if you called us at the extension office, we'd have an answer for you. And
you know, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, they'll have some recipes for that.
Oh, okay. So, you know, those are great opportunities. Once you start making your, can I get a wash rag or something?
Sure.
And I'll keep garbage down here. So one thing I do, just kind of like to clean up after every piece, knowing that that arrow come through that animal there. And we don't know exactly how that arrow passed through that animal. So just cleaning up a little bit. I'm not going to take and disinfect everything, but try to get some of the loose stuff off of here. So this is the rear leg. You can see I put the saran wrap over the cut. And if you look at that cut, there is hardly any discoloration or drying on it. So you can take this animal, take those back and front legs off and fit it in a decent sized cooler for preservation. Now one thing in doing that, You know, we got probably a little bit of sirloin right up here because I was trying to cut it in the cooler and all. So hanging it up, and you can see here where they hang it. I like working my deer if it's hung. We don't have that luxury everywhere. But I can hang that animal up and never cut the legs off or anything and take all the meat off of it. And that's easier generally. So you can see the ball and socket joint up here. So I always like to start with how's that bone run. So that bone is going to run right down. If you look at that knee, that bone's going to run with that joint right there.
Did you say that was the rear?
This is the rear leg. So this probably has, you know, some of the better meat, especially for roast on it. And I'm just going to trim a little bit more up here. Kind of see how things are. So this up here is still part of that sirloin. I'm going to cut right through. And it kind of is going to expose. You can start seeing this round muscle here. So we'll take this on off. Now, I remove most of the fat. If you've noticed, when I've been cutting, I take the fat off as I go. We were talking about gamey flavor earlier, and I think that a lot of deer have the gaminess when they have been fed. So if you're feeding deer corn year-round, or they're in the corn patch next door or your farm, I think that they get a little bit of gamier flavor because of that fat. I don't like the taste of venison fat. Some people do. You might.
So you said you add fat sometimes, like if you're grinding? Some people do that?
Yeah, I do. And I like beef fat if I'm just doing burger because I like beef. But I think pork fat's probably more acceptable. It doesn't give it a different flavor per se.
And there's probably a good bit of pork fat around.
Yeah. You know, if you contact some of the processors or the people even selling local foods, probably the best source for that. A lot of those, you know, fat doesn't necessarily sell all the time real great, so they save it up till this time of year and sell to hunters. And if you want to make a sausage, a breakfast sausage, I think pork fat does pretty good. I'm just cleaning all this fat off and just getting thin strips of meat. Don't put those into jerky. Let me show, I guess. You can see how thin this is. Mm-hmm. And if you put that in with jerky that is cut at 1/4 inch, what happens is this ends up a potato chip. Or a jerky chip. And the others don't. Or the others end up being medium rare, and you know, this is just right. So the more consistent in those cuts. Now, to show something here about that jerky while we're here, because here's where I cut a lot of jerky out if you're not wanting it. But this is a jerky board I bought last year. And you would lay your cut on here, put this down, and then it has this knife. And it's supposed to allow you to cut through and do 1/4 inch. So that's supposed to be 1/4 inch. That looks a little thick to me, but...
Yeah, look how that just trimmed it off right
yeah.
there.
So if you want to do that, it's a product that I've tested and it works. I don't like it for me. I would rather just hand cut because it's just easier for me. So
well, you've been doing this since you're 12.
Right.
So.
Exactly. So there's no firm rules to what's right or wrong. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to start cutting right down that seam.
So that's kind of like a roast right there, huh?
Yes. So if you listen, You hear that bone? Mm-hmm. There he is.
So a roast would be like a muscle, a whole muscle.
Yes,
Okay.
or it could be multiple muscles. The problem with venison is the muscles are so much smaller than beef that when you get multiple ones together, the sinew on there goes different ways. So it's harder to cut and keep tender. So we're going to open that up, and I'm just going to keep following that bone. And remember that the tails, what I'm calling the tails, are the attachment at either end. And so you kind of have to keep those tails going. And I'm just going right around this round bone, and I'm not trying to trim everything. I'll trim it after I get it off of here. And then this back knuckle always is a little funky. I don't know if you can see, but this tendon right here runs up into this muscle. And so it kind of sticks up, and you have to go up and around it. I don't think I can hold it to where the camera, but I'll show you when I get it off of here.
They really don't have much marbling at all.
No, they don't. You know, and I've had them that's come straight out of the cornfield and all, and they still don't have much marbling. I don't know what it is compared to beef as far as calories per serving, but I guarantee you it's much leaner than beef. So I've got here, and if you look, we're getting pretty thin here. So I'm just going to take and cut right down there to end this one. And there again, what I suggest is look at the muscles on how they go and think about it. This is probably the best roast out of the whole animal, in my opinion, if you like the roast. This is what I like my steaks out of. So, you know, you can take and cook this. Now, you know, in cooking deer meat, I'd trim this up still. We want wet heat because it doesn't have much fat in it. And we want to cook it slow and longer. If you get, you know, a steak, you want it really just like you would a beef steak, probably less. Now, one thing with the color of deer meat, when you cook it, it'll still be pink looking, but that's past a medium. So the color, when it's well done, is not going to be like a beef. It's already a different color. So a little bit of pink in it's still going to be that medium well.
Well, you probably should use a thermometer.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. But you know, a lot of people look at that color, and so don't be alarmed if you get you're cooking your venison and it comes out and it looks pinker than you like. Taste it, because it's probably enough well done for you, or it's probably cooked further than you think it is. That's the wildness of the meat. So I'm going to go ahead and just try to, and I've deboned a whole animal before and then rolled it back up and roasted it on a fire. And that's pretty good. It takes a long time to debone it.
I bet it tasted a long time to roast it too.
It did, yeah. Yeah, and you know, that's some of those hunting camp traditions that the tradition of hunting was such a family thing. I think we've lost some of that, you know, in today's world, and that's just the change in progress. So I've got that done. Now you can see here that hard knee joint that comes up.
Would that be good for stock?
Yeah, we're going to cut this off for stock too. So you can see how these muscles attach down here. I don't know if the camera can see inside here, but you can see where my finger is. Come out the other side there.
Oh, yeah.
So the easiest way to cut to keep your roast and your steaks tender is get these muscles out and separate them. if you cooking one muscle, it's much easier than trying to cook 2 or 3. That in a beef animal, every muscle now is taken apart. And, you know, we found that, we used to cut it with these 2 together, and we always had this toughness. Now if we just take it apart and cut it a little bit different,
More tender.
it's improved. So you can see, you don't have to use the knife all the time. Some of that just pulls loose. And then there's another, see, would be the eye of the round. So it's a really great steak, but steaks out of this rear here need to be very thick. And we'll get to the best steaks here in a minute, but when I cut steaks out of this, and we will, I'll cut them 2 or 3 inches thick. And they're not very big, so it's not like you got a 15 centimeter ribeye, you know, that's that thick. And it makes
you're going to leave any of these for roast, or you're going to cut steaks?
I'm just going to cut steaks out.
Okay.
Unless you want roast, and I'll cut you a roast.
No, I'm good with steak. And jerky, too. That's smelling good over here. You know, last summer I took a trip, and it was a bicycle trip, and I was, I think it was Germany, and they had deer, they were feeding them on cattle. They were, you know, behind fences, and they were like sitting under the trees. It was really quite interesting. So I guess that there are other cultures that eat. Maybe it's more common to like go to the store and get deer meat.
Absolutely, it's more accepted in some of those cultures, just like some of the organ meat that, you know, Americans curl their nose up at.
Right. Or those Rocky Mountain oysters you were telling me
Yeah,
about.
exactly. You know, I like them. They're good. You know, Watauga County, we used to have an elk farm.
Is that right?
Yeah, you know, out in the western part of the county. And so some of the reasons they kind of got into it with the wildlife people because they didn't want to follow some protocols, and they ended up, the Department of Wildlife come out and euthanized the elk.
Aww.
But they were trying to farm and sell, you know, elk meat.
I would imagine it was kind of similar to deer meat.
Yeah.
They seem like, I mean, the elk, of course, are a lot larger, but they eat the same things, and they're out roaming in the wild.
You know, and we do have some deer farms and some bison farms around, and you know, there's a lot of people, we would like to be able to raise deer, but they're hard to do in captivity.
Well, for one thing, they can jump a lot higher than cows.
That's true.
Cows just kind of stand there. So
So Margie, since you're going to make stock, I'm not going to clean all this bone off, but you can see what I left. A lot of times I'll clean that off as well. Let's see here.
So yeah, would it be good to cut any of that so the marrow will come out?
Yeah, I'm going to. It's easier than cutting some of these knuckles. So you can see there's a lot more marrow in here than what there is on that other bone.
About my stock bag.
Don't forget to use a lot of caution with these saws, because that's the worst I was ever cut, was doing this right here.
I bet.
It's easier there again if your animal's hanging up. This is much easier to do. And you can see all that marrow, that's the biggest bone.
That is. So So that stock will be great for some winter soup.
Yep.
Make the stroganoff.
Yeah, like I say, folks, for me, venison makes the best stroganoff there is. Open a can up, that one of them jars, and sometimes I make the sauce the night before, and like I say, it's pretty easy to do. And I like to make it with spaghetti squash. And so, you know, it's really pretty healthy. Or I think it is.
That sounds good to me.
So you can see we're just going to start going back and trimming these mussels up. And I'll show you how to do a couple of different cuts with them.
So this is a lot of meat here.
Yes.
Rear.
So this is probably your highest yielding. Would be, you know, from that round, we would call it the round. In a pork, it would be the rump or the ham. There's a lot of different mussels. So this is one, if you look at it, I call it the white meat of the deer. It's a much brighter meat. And you can see, so it's got long fibers running this way. So if you cook this, if you take both of them and put them together and tie them together and cook them, and then you can just do a nice slice on that, a nice roast with that with some vegetables, and it's a good tender cut that you're looking at probably, you know, if you had it prepped and in the fridge, you could come home and get it done within an hour, hour and 20 minutes. It doesn't take long.
Would you cook it with a low temperature in a moist environment?
Yes, a low temperature in a moist environment over a little bit longer period of time. Check it with your meat thermometer. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the tails of these off. Because these tails I'll just grind, and then I'm going to cut medallions out of them. And what a medallion is just like a little steak. So you can take these suckers and take all of these and put them, you can fry them, you can do all kinds of things with them to cook them. But you want to get about an inch or an inch and a half. And
fancy. Medallions. Of
medallions,
venison.
yes.
On a menu.
You can really impress a guest, you know.
Yes.
You have to have something else for them to eat. But these are great. And you know, you do 2 or 3 of these per serving, and that's probably 4 ounces, which should be correct, I think, 4 to 6 ounce serving. So and I do a lot of those. This is something like I would cut for stew beef here. It's a good piece of the loin. It's got fibers that are going this way. You could do, you know, stir fry. You can do all kinds of things. Whatever it is that fits your cooking is what you should do, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's,
you can decide that when you cut this up yourself.
exactly. And you can see, so I'm taking this other upper knuckle, and it looked like one muscle, but there's actually 3. And so by tearing these apart, we can take and clean this up. And if you're going to do a roast, I like roasting these. I like tying them together. And these work out great once you've cleaned them up, and you can put these 2 back to back and grind this one. It's a little bit tougher. But if you think about, you got that other, not large servings, this isn't a huge deer, but then bake that nice and slow, and it's, if you try to cook this like a steak, you're not going to like deer meat because it's chewy.
You think that's what a lot of people do? They just don't really know what to do with it, so they're cooking it like beef.
Yeah, I think a lot of people make a mistake and try to cook things like they would a normal steak. And I'll cut some big steaks here in a minute out of this rump and show you what I like to have if I'm just going to, well, what I'm going to have for dinner tonight.
Well, you definitely deserve a reward for all this.
I left them steaks there, and you know, a lot of people, they want that tenderloin. They think that's the best cut, and I'm not denying that it's a good cut, but I would prefer steaks out of this right here. I can get them thicker, and I don't like my steak cooked very well.
So for safety, then you would rather 145 degrees for your the inside of your steak.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If you get more rare than that,
Yeah, it could be
you know,
dangerous,
you're
right?
taking a risk.
So yeah, this little thermometer, I mean, this comes in so handy because a lot of times you think something's hot, colder than it is, and then you can put your thermometer in and it verifies it. So it makes you feel good that you're not overcooking something.
And you know, one thing you can do is cooking these steaks is when you bring them off, cover them. And I think it's important with a lean meat to let them rest. And cover, you can tint them with aluminum foil, or just cover them with a lid and give them, you know, 10 minutes to rest. They shouldn't get cold in 10 minutes.
They usually cook some more.
They actually do, you know, they cook a lot longer. So I'm just going to come back and we're going to try to cut and trim right down.
Well, Eddie, maybe you can come on one of the shows in the future and cook us a steak. Show us how it's done.
Well, I would love to do that because I think most of the bad eating experiences come from not knowing how to cook correctly. Of course, for me, the biggest rule is well done is not what most people's idea of well done is. You know, I'm like you. I like that cooking thermometer, and
Just make sure you're safe.
make sure you're safe.
Don't overcook it.
When I grew up, my mama, she'd be cooking, and we didn't have much ground beef growing up ever, but anyhow, she'd have it, and I'd always go in, and whatever she cooked, I'd eat it raw.
Ooh.
And I wouldn't do that today with what I know for anything, but for whatever reason. No. You know, the people serve tartar, and I guess I was just lucky. But we do have a safe food system, you know, and if you think about beef and you can eat it a little bit more rare and take that risk, it's slaughtered in a sterile environment, or as sterile as you can be, you know, as clean as you can be. This was, you know, out in the woods. So this, you can see these fibers are going this way, and we'll just take and we'll put that with the medallions. But then I come in here and I like to cut me a steak.
So is that kind of the rule? You cut against the grain, right?
Well, yeah, some people would cut a little bit this way because when you cook it, you know, you're going to have to cut and then cut against the grain again, perhaps, to eat. But these longer fibers, it's the only way to do it. And if you cook that correctly, it will be a good eating experience. So there, you know, out of that one muscle, you got 4 servings. And this is probably correct. I could put it on the scale to see, but I would say those are about right.
3 to 4 ounces.
Yep, 3 to 4 ounces.
Yeah.
And the important thing on steak, even beef steak for the most part, now not every steak's equal, you want to cook it fast, higher heat. You'll want to put some fat with this. I like to make a butter, an herb butter, that I'm always, you know, keeping that put on the steak in the skillet. But you have to put some fat back with them.
So could you grill that steak?
Absolutely. But you're going to have to watch it because it's dry, you know, no fat to it.
So you would have to put some kind of fat even on the grill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, something like that, you could do a wrap of bacon like you would do a filet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very similar. You know, a filet is a very lean cut of meat. And I'll show that here on this animal where that filet comes from, and it comes from same place in the cow. This is that silver skin again. It pops up. It's evil stuff, you know, and you just have to trim. That's probably the hardest thing when I talk to people that's been to the workshops. They want to know, well, how do you do that? And it's, well, you learn to do it. And you learn that it looks like there's meat left, but most of the time there's really not much. Now, if you are going to do fat in your grind, the fat preferable to use is some like this. You can see how flaky or leafy it is. It's some of what we would call leaf fat, or pork is what they make lard from. It's actually the KPH, or the kidney pelvic heart, so it's inside the body of the animal, and it's a much purer fat. So if I was going to want to do deer fat for grind, that's where I would get it from.
So not the fat right under the skin, but more the inside of the body fat.
Right.
Okay.
Some of this outer fat, you know, I think it's where you can see how this just comes off like in leaves, or it's
Right.
in pieces. I'd just rather throw it away myself and then use fat from, you know, a domestic pork or beef for the flavor. And I can control the weight more, you know, because sausages are done in percentages of fat. You know, an Italian sausage is supposed to have 28% fat to it.
Is that by weight?
Yeah.
Percentage by weight? Well, that's
Yeah.
a lot of fat.
It is. And if you look at USDA standards, you can't call it that unless it has that much fat to it.
I wonder about these chicken sausages, because they are very lean. That's
Yeah, well,
I get a lot of times.
and maybe what I'm saying is pork
Right, it has to
sausage
be
has to
pork
be
sausage,
28%. So here's a nice other little muscle that we're going to get out. This one's one of those that's really tender to cook. It's not very big, but I just come in and, like I say, I can get them pretty thick.
Get your medallion there.
Yep. If you think of a beef, you can buy some medallions on smaller muscles, but these are just, I call them that because they're small. You can trim this one here since it's got the other muscle with it. Make them all look. Like I say, you can cook them just so many different ways, and they're going to eat, like I say, they're going to eat great. It's the reason I like to do some deer, is for those wonderful little steaks that you get.
So, you know, I always think that part of the reason why something's not tender is because of use, right? The muscle being used. So would the more tender cut be like around the torso, or there's some good tender cuts there for
Yeah.
deer, like it would be for a cow?
Yeah, and we're going to show that here. I'll show cutting the fillet out, and then we'll cut the loin.
That's probably the most tender cut.
The most tender. And some people, the most favorite. Like I say, you know, some people fight you over the tenderloin, and for me, it's okay. But everybody has their personal preference. It's awful good roasted. You know, for me, what deer is harvested this time of year in the fall, and we're getting so many great veggies. We got so many potatoes and squash, and venison just goes with all of that. You know, I think of the pilgrims more of sharing venison with the indigenous people than turkey, but just my thinking, I guess.
Well, there are a lot of turkey out there too, though. Along the parkway, you know, you see the gangs of them.
Yeah. You know, they say there's more deer now than back in colonial times. And I think that's just due to our farming practices. So this cut, you can see it's got this big piece of silver skin and this up here that's this connective tissue that's hard. So we're just going to go in, and if you try to go to the end, you can't do it. But if you start in the middle and you just take your knife, just stay right underneath that where you can see it. The key is not to get nothing there, and then you can turn this around and go the other direction. And I'll show you, you can, I'm not good enough to peel it when I'm doing this, but I can peel it back on the other side. So then you can lay this down and you just push and peel. And then and you just trim that fat off, and that's a great piece of lean right here. Like I say, that's this. I usually have a pile, and I'm putting that in to cook right away.
So you don't go hungry, right?
That's right, you know. So we're going to cut the same kind of steaks out of this. And that one's a little lopsided, but I didn't want to do a trim and waste it. You need at least a minimum of 1.5 inches. And then I'll cut the tail off. You can see these have a little bit, they're multiple muscle, but they'll still cook and eat really good. I just like to package them a little different. We're almost done.
With that part.
Yeah.
Do you need a scrap bowl or bag?
Well, I've got it right here in the corner. Remember, I did half of this animal last night, so it's not that you can just whoop and it's done. You know, there is a lot of work to it.
So how many hours do you think it might take to do a whole animal?
I would say, you know, I would count on 8 hours.
Wow.
To do one, especially just starting. So you can see here, this is the fillet, and I'll show you here. Let me flip it around so I'll go over here. Yeah, this one had 2 arrows put into it. So when I cut this out, I like to cut from this side so I can over top so I can really see what's going on with it. And I'll come up here and just go in and keep your knife against that bone. And then go ahead and get your tail done. And then if you go back, you'll go against the inner part of the spine. You'll feel each little vertebrae and cut right on up through it. Now that's what all the rage is about for most people.
Boy, that's not very big. Is it?
And I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong, it really is a good piece of meat. the way I cook it is I put them both together and I roll them up and then I roast it.
Can you recognize it in with the rest of the meat?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I left it whole. So when we package it, I kind of know what I got where. So we'll talk a little bit about what we've got going on here. This is entry wound, so we can trim a lot of this up. We'll get a lot of this meat here, and you can trim this up, especially deer don't need to age. A lot of people want to hang them for a while. Unless you've got a really good cooler, I don't think you're going to add much flavor to the meat.
Do you need to wait like 24 hours before you cook it?
Yeah, you need to let rigor set in. So you know that 24 hours is better to let rigor come and kind of go. And rigor mortis, what I'm talking about is the muscles will stiffen up and then they're going to go back and relax again. And the same with chickens. You know, if you cut them up immediately and don't allow that to happen, then you get a tougher bird. So this meat on the outside, you can do it like I say, like you do a skirt steak or some flat meat. You're going to have to be careful how you cut it when you serve it. But you can see here, this is very similar to what if you were buying a skirt steak. It's long fibers. You're going to want to do it really high heat, and then you're going to want to cut it. Makes good tacos. I cut it first. Yeah, or fajitas, yeah. You know, and you can just go ahead and, if I was going to do a meat like that, I'd want to go against the grain to cut it. And that's where these bigger knives come in, because they're sharp and they have more weight to them, so they'll cut through. And you always got a little bit of that sinew. But you can see I'm not going against them 90 degrees. I'm kind of cutting them. So when you cook that, if you think about how that fiber is going to come off, you've shortened the fiber. The meat's going to be just as tough. It's just the way you're cutting the fiber.
Did you already cut some off here, or is that just, there's just not that much meat around the chest?
There's not much around the chest. This is the side I did last night.
Okay.
And, you know, I come in and I try to get all of this flat meat off, even if it's just a grind. It's pretty good meat.
But then you don't want any of that that's got the blood clots.
No, I'll trim that blood clot off of this, because I know this, it's not a bruise, it's just where the blood had pooled before the animal got cut open. So we can trim, we'll lay it down here and trim it. Now you get up here in the neck, you can cut this one muscle right here for a roast. I hear lots of people talk about neck roast, and there is so much connective tissue, there's not much roast. For me, I'm going to spend my time on grinding this instead of trying to trim it up and make it into a roast. But you can definitely take and tie it up, and if you kill a much larger animal, it's going to have much more meat on the neck. The one thing I'll say about, you know, if you're hunting horns or antlers, deer don't have horns, or a male animal and you're wanting a trophy, just remember your meat quality goes down with age. You can see there's just, I keep just running into a bone every time. You know, you just can't get around that neck very good to get much off.
So what do you do with the carcass?
You can just put it in the garbage, take it to the landfill. They take tons of them this time of year. If you have a slaughterhouse, that's where theirs goes. Some landfills now will keep it separate and it's going into compost, which is a great, thing for it to happen because composting breaks your bone and all of them.
It must get really hot to do that.
Yeah, well that's proper compost,
Right.
So you can see here, we've got some leaf matter. So what I'm going to do with that is we're not going to eat that.
I was going to say that didn't look like it's worth the work right there.
I don't know if you can see that, but that would be stomach content.
Ah, yeah.
And I'll need some paper towels to clean here, Margie.
Okay.
Please. So this deer, like I say, we're just going to have more waste just because that's the way it is. And I hear from people, don't be surprised if you do take a deer somewhere to have it butchered, when you go pick it up and you have, 25 pounds of meat. Don't think they stole your meat.
So that would be like for a 60-pound deer or an 80-pound deer?
Well, yeah, an 80-pound deer, you should be able to get 25 pounds of meat. Let's see. I guess I need to work this up.
So, if you go and take it to someone to process for you, I wonder what it winds up being per pound that you pay.
Oh, it's at least $3 or $4 a pound. And that's if you're not having any sausage or anything made, just a straight cut like we're doing. And you can see how labor intensive it is though. So, it is a skilled trade.
They probably can do it a little faster than most of us.
Yeah, well,
They do it
yeah.
all the time, right?
They've got good facilities, and tables, and, much better and help. And they can hang things up. If this animal was hanging up, I would be much further along.
So when it's hanging up, then you can just kind of go down more with your line.
Yeah, you don't have to hold something all the time.
Right.
And it's actually safer for me cutting, but that's how I've done it for years. So, I'm teaching you my way to do it, but remember, it's kind of one of those deals that there's no rules, it's yours. See how much silver skin, and there's more silver skin and connective tissue on a deer because there's so many, the muscles are so much smaller and there's just more of them the way it's designed to run. Most of this, like I say, this is neck meat. You can see it's not real thick, but it's versatile meat, but I grind most of it. It's just easier to grind than to try to take and clean this up to where you can roll it and make it look good. Some people don't care on those looks. I think, food preparation, it's not just on taste, but it's on that smell of that jerky going right now. It's going to taste good no matter what because it smells so good. but a lot of that is on that visual aspect of it as well. If you're grinding it, you know, it's all going to look the same when you get finished with it. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit before we get right at the grinder about the grinding plates. And for me, I don't like a really fine grind on my venison. I think if you're going to put fat with it, you know, a medium's good, and that's what we're going to use today. I like a large one. If I know all I'm going to be doing is cooking it in casseroles or something more of that nature, I'll just do the biggest grind I can, so it's not real coarse. The thing about venison is the coarser your grind, sometimes it pushes the connective tissue through the grinding plate, so it doesn't grind very good. So you may have to watch that, but know what plates you need to use, and they sell quite a few. So when you look on this spinal column steel, this is the rear. We're going to take out this outside. This would be what we would consider the ribeye on a beef animal, and I refer to that just because it's kind of what people's familiar with. I always keep some old kitchen rags that has holes in it to clean an area like this off. You can see how good that does. And they didn't know that was there when they skinned the animal, and then that just goes in the garbage and can go away. And then I always have some around to wipe my hands. So this is the sirloin. You can see there's a distinct muscle change right here, and we'll go in and find where that how far down that goes. You can see right here. So that sirloin comes across that loin. You can see how that goes right down in there. So this long muscle here continues to right here. So the easiest way to cut that is just to end it. And you're going to have a little bit of sirloin and a little bit of loin together. And then we're going to come right up here and we're going to go right against that spine. So you can see how I did this one. We're going to do that. And so just let your knife ride right against there. And you don't have to do it all the first time. And this is where a little bit stiffer boning knife works wonders. And this is where hanging it up really works for me. I'm kind of doing it backwards because I'm used to starting at the rear and working my way down. Just go ahead and work that down till you hit the ribs. You don't have to do it all in one swift cut.
So that tenderloin was like on the inside of the carcass, and then that's on the outside.
Yes. So, like I say, to relate it to beef, which most people understand, filet mignon, ribeye. And I won't go into porterhouse and all that, but basically that's where your best steaks are coming from.
Do you need me to hold it or anything?
No, I'm just going to roll it around here and get to where I can see. And like I say, you just find them ribs and lay your knife right against it and let it flow. So there you got the whole loin out. And I'll show you how you can trim it up and cook and clean on it. But I'm going to go ahead and finish on the back end back here on this sirloin, and just some other trims on some of these other long muscles here. Now this sirloin back here is really good, and you can see it's got a good fat cover to it. This makes a wonderful roast. You can take this, clean this fat cap off, roll it and tie it. What I like to do is take both sides and put them together. And it seems to make, you know, especially on a roast, it makes something big enough to fool with or serve, you know, more than 2 people. And then I always just turn this fat, take that thin fillet knife, get all that good meat off of there you can. We'll start grinding here in just a minute, and you'll see how that just all... I always tell people, if all you put in the grind is the worst meat, then that's what you have in quality of your meat. If you put some of this sirloin and some of these other good cuts in there, it tastes better. This deer doesn't really have much fat on it. And I'm not taking much more neck because I can see that there's leaf material, and I know that that leaf material is from inside the animal. It does. So, you know, if this animal hadn't have been gut shot, we could have trimmed all these ribs, and you could definitely still do it. But I'm just not going to take the risk. So I'm going to cut this sirloin for steaks, I believe. Actually, I think I'm going to leave them right like that. And you got 2 nice sirloin steaks that'll cook up. I don't know if you can see that. One of my favorites. So if you look at taste and quality on beef, you know, first, of course, is the filet, is what people would say their favorite is. You can see how that knife is running right there. So this silver skin right here is pretty tough. And I'm just trying to push down with my thumb on the meat itself and pulling up even with my knife. Not, you can see I've got that pretty thin on there. I know people that leave it on, they say, oh, you can cut it off at the table, and it's just not what people's used to. I'll clean that a little bit up.
So it'd be kind of chewy, wouldn't it? Yeah,
it could definitely be chewy. And you know, like I say, eating experience is everything.
That's why you're doing it. My time is up for my canning. I can turn off my heat.
They've made me work in here with it really hot. You can see, so this different muscle down here, I'm going to pull that off. You can see how it comes at the tail of this, and I'm going to follow that down. Now this makes a pretty good steak right here. It'll have some connective tissue, makes a good stir fry or a fajita. It has some connective tissue. We're going to grind it. And then I look, and this little bit of silver skin here, we'll see if we can get it. I know this is a young animal because this silver skin or connective tissue is still very, very thin. If you get an animal that's 4 or 5 years old, this stuff is so thick. So this, the best way to do it for cooking, let's say, is to come in for me and roll it. And you can put one tie around it or two, or stick it in a bag and then roast it. And it comes out really good. I'm just going to split it in half, and then we can take and, how do you want it? You want steaks or you want roast or?
I'll take steaks.
You want steaks. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut pretty thick.
Now, could I use a dry heat on those? Would that be, or is it still too tough?
Oh no, I think you could grill or dry heat on these more tender cuts.
Just make sure you put some fat on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And don't overcook it.
Yes. Nice. Well, we can still cook out for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a bag we'll put this in, Margie? Because
Yes, I will get it back.
I always keep this separate, and I'll put this other piece of filet inside with it. So deer meat can keep in the freezer for up to a year below at 0 or below. I always like to put a date when I stick something in the freezer, and there's your filet. So we're going to start grinding. This grinder, one thing I'll say, whoa.
It's got to have it plugged in.
There we go.
There we go.
I have a foot pedal with it. It was an extra $65, well worth it. Because when you're grinding meat and you have to be turning on and off all the time, it's a real pain. So the way it is now, I've got a foot pedal and I've got 2 hands to feed my grind through. So you just start feeding. You never want to get your fingers down in there. So you can you see coming out there on the camera?
No, I can't.
So these long fibers, you can see I'm not having to use the plunger. I'm just letting it pull it on through.
Is that your sirloin?
Yes, those are the sirloins. So I'm doing a mix of frozen and unfrozen, and it keeps it going through. If you can have it almost all the way frozen, it works the best. Do not put your fingers ever down in the hole. You can see I've got the plunger here. Occasionally I'll clean it out, but I'm not having to do much. It's pulling it through really good. This is a medium. You can see that refers to the size of those ribbons coming out. And even without adding fat, you can see that there is some marbling and fat in the meat that's natural.
Now, if we forgot to label it ground deer meat and just label it ground meat, do you think anyone would know?
Yeah, you can definitely tell the difference, I think. Some people may not know.
It might have to do with the way you prepare it too. Like if you put a bunch of chili powder in it or something like that.
Oh yeah, I think spaghetti sauce, anything that you're making a sauce or a meat with. Sausage, it seems though to me, I can taste it quicker that it's venison sausage than anything else. And I don't know, it's always been one of those curious aspects to me.
That is interesting. Because I know that there are a lot of spices that go
So all that hard work, you know, this is actually the easy part. I think this grinder right now is a couple $100 on Lim or Walton's. It's worth the investment if you're a long-time hunter or you're homesteader that's going to grind chicken, pork, whatever. It's worth the investment.
But not if you're just going to kill one deer.
Yeah, if you're going to kill one deer a year, you know, they make a hand crank one that works great. You have to have something solid to mount them to, but then you can really take and you know, run a lot of meat through, especially if you got some kids that, you know, home from school with COVID and need to burn some energy. Make a game out of it.
What about like a KitchenAid attachment? Don't they have?
I did that for years, and it worked just fine for a couple of deer. And there's different levels of those mixers and the attachments that come with it. So if you're going to do sausage, you know, you do want to pay attention to your grind. Some of them, I would probably try to do a coarser grind the first time and then mix my fat with it and my spices and do the second grind. It's one of the things about sausage making is you almost have to have a mixer to put it in to really get your spices done. That's the reason I like to grind my spices the second time with it. And it really does a good job of mixing. It can be hard putting this back through the mixer. You can see we went through most all of this grind meat here really quickly.
That'll be.
I bet you there's going to be 12 pounds, maybe.
Nice.
10 or 12 would be my guess.
Makes it worth your time.
Yeah, it does. No, I think it does, you know. There's something about processing your own food that I think a lot of people appreciate now.
They enjoy that, yeah.
They may not want to do it every year, but doing it one time at least to kind of experience that.
Well, it makes you feel like you know how to do something. Everything's kind of broken up in our society to where we, at the end of the day, you think, well, what have I really done?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the same thing with gardening, right? Canning your beans or whatever.
You know, you can make jerky out of ground meat. They have these
I've seen that.
where you mix it up and then you squirt it out on your dehydration racks. And I've had some of it, and it's okay flavor, but I like the jerky chewy texture, you know, a little bit. And so there's a lot of options. You know, you could cut the really great steaks out and grind everything and make jerky out of some of that ground. And
We'll have to check our jerky pretty soon. It's almost a couple hours since I put it on.
so I just let this run a little bit, and it should clean out more and more out of the auger. And what I do is I actually like to weigh it, and I put my ground in 1 pound packs because most recipes, that's what they're going to call for.
Good idea.
All right, more steaks. There ain't going to be 10 pounds here.
Think there'll be 10?
No,
Yeah.
6, 7. I'm telling you, it's a mature doe. That's what Steve kept saying, and Dan. But it's not.
A big one.
It's not as same size as last year.
8.5.
Because I know how much meat we had last year.
Wow, that was great, Eddie. I'm so excited we got all the ground meat, the steaks. I know it was a lot of work, but I thank you for showing us how to do it.
Oh, you're welcome. And any questions, people can contact me through my email would probably be best. Eddy_Labus at NCStateUniversity.edu.
All right, you look on the Watauga website, right?
And we
Absolutely.
really appreciate you doing it. I mean, he worked really hard, and you guys saw that. But it was I was watching from afar, but I got to watch him work, and it was fabulous. So appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome.
All right, and the hunting season hasn't even started yet, so people can get a heads up with all this.
Right.
So, all right, thanks for joining us.